Welcome to day one in our 31-day devotional series of the study of the book of Ecclesiastes from the Old Testament. Our title for today is The Words of the Preacher from Ecclesiastes 1:1. To give our context of who we are reading about today, we're going to read the entirety of chapter 1. Beginning in verse 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does a man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has already been in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out wisdom, all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is but a striving after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. Occasionally, I will see a biography or an autobiography of someone rather famous in our present world. That's not unusual in and of itself. However, when that person is only in what we generally think of as the early stages of life, that strikes me as rather odd. Perhaps it's just an opportunistic attempt to cash in on the popularity of that person so as to make more money. But I jump unfairly to conclusions before giving it further thought. Consider The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank, or The Diary of Peter Ginz, a teenage prodigy killed in Auschwitz. Maybe Thura's Diary, an account of a 19-year-old girl in war-torn Iraq. Perhaps the autobiography of Apollo Anton Ono, the fabulous speed skater from the 2002 Winter Olympics. These are inspirational stories for young people that teach about adversity and the trials of life. But they also teach those of us who are older that young people indeed have struggles in this life. Our study of the book of Ecclesiastes begins simply by observing a few noteworthy items about the author, the preacher, the son of David, king of Israel, Solomon. For so he identifies himself in the very first verse and again in Ecclesiastes 1:12, where he says, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. Solomon closes the writing near the end by saying of himself in Ecclesiastes 12, verses 9 and 10, besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs with great care. The preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. But this is far from the inspirational autobiographies aimed at young people. Solomon's story seems almost at time to be the confessions of a guy who had it all and squandered opportunity after opportunity. Perhaps a little background might help us to see where this comes from. Solomon was, in fact, the king of Israel, for we are told in 1 Kings 11:42. And the time that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years. Solomon came to be king under tumultuous circumstances when his brother declared himself to be king instead. In 1 Kings 1:5, now Adonijah the son of Haggith exalted himself, saying, I will be king. And he prepared for himself chariots and horsemen, and 50 men to run before him. But Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, David's wife, and Nathan the prophet intercede on Solomon's behalf, and David declared him to be king. 1 Kings 1:29 through 30. And the king swore, saying, As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my soul out of every adversity, as I swore to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, saying, Solomon your son shall reign after me, and he shall sit on my throne in my place. Even so will I do this day. As Solomon begins, we read in 1 Kings 3:5. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, Ask what I shall give you. In a moment of humility and meekness, this is what Solomon desires and asks of the Lord in verse 9 of 1 Kings 3. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to govern this, your great people? The Lord is pleased with Solomon's request and gives him even more. In verses 10 through 13 we read, It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this. And God said to him, Because you have asked this and have not asked for yourself long life or riches or the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, behold, I now do according to your word. Behold, I give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has been before you, and none like you shall arise after you. I give you also what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that no other king shall compare with you all your days. God indeed blessed Solomon. Still, he gave a grave warning to Solomon about the consequences of turning away from the Lord. 1 Kings 9, verses 6 through 9. But if you turn aside from following me, you or your children, and do not keep my commandments and my statutes that I have set before you, but go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land that I have given them, and the house that I have consecrated for my name I will cast out of my sight. And Israel will become a proverb and a byword among all peoples. And this house will become a heap of ruins. Everyone passing by it will be astonished and will hiss, and they will say, Why has the Lord done thus to this land and this house? Then they will say, Because they abandoned the Lord their God, who brought their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and laid hold on other gods, and worshipped them and served them. Therefore, the Lord has brought all this disaster on them. Solomon did, in fact, turn from the Lord. We read in 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 4 through 6. For when Solomon was old, his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. So Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not wholly follow the Lord, as David his father had done. Kings and queens and dignitaries came from far and wide to see the accomplishments and hear the wisdom of Solomon. We read in 1 Kings 4:32 through 34. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. He spoke of trees, from the cedar that is in Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the wall. He spoke of the beasts, of the birds, and the reptiles, and of fish. And the people of all nations came to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and from all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom. The Queen of Sheba's reaction to all that Solomon possessed of those things, we read in 2 Chronicles 9:3 through 4. And when the queen of Sheba had seen the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food of his table, the seating of his officials, and the attendance of his servants and their clothing, his cupbearers and their clothing, and his burnt offerings that he offered at the house of the Lord, there was no more breath in her. Yet for all of Solomon's wisdom, wealth, and accomplishment, he will account for them over and over as a striving after wind and vanity, as we shall see. For the next 30 days that follow, we shall peer into Solomon's writing here in Ecclesiastes and strive to gain an understanding, if possible, of this complicated and fascinating life of whom God said, "Behold, I give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has been before you, and none like you shall arise after you." Lord willing, join us again tomorrow as we continue in this study of the book of Ecclesiastes.